Sounds like we're good now. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Just let us know if there's any more problems. Sorry about that, folks. Just welcome to Cam, welcome Kijo. We're going to go ahead and get started.
And I'm sorry, Matt, I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you one more time. I'm so sorry. Maybe we might just give a little bit of the information about the chat just so that folks are aware. We can, and that's it. And they didn't hear who we were. I apologize.
Yeah, let's give that information one more time. So a couple things to know as we're getting started here. First, please familiarize yourself with the chat interface. To join the chat, just enter your name or any name you prefer and click agree to the terms of service and the privacy policy. You can add to the chat at any time. Please put in your questions. We'll get time for those at the end. This program is an Art Anthology Chapter 4 as part of the CMA exhibit Stories from Storage. And we're going to be hearing today from poet Kamden Hilliard, who's going to present a new work developed in dialogue with Kara Walker's monumental collage drawing, The Republic of New Afrika at Crossroads. And we'll be joined by curator Kijo Lee, who's going to discuss the histories that Walker's work unearths and the new understandings that Hilliard's poem presents. Well, with that, I want to make sure that we have as much time as possible to talk about the work, to hear Cam's new poem. So let's jump in with Cam. You were invited to produce a creative response to any object in Stories from Storage. So out of the hundreds of objects in this exhibit, what drew you to the Republic of New Afrika at a Crossroads by Kara Walker?
Yeah, well, thanks, Matt, for doing this one. And I guess what I would say is that Kara Walker fan here. And when I found out that one of her pieces was in the exhibit, I think I was immediately drawn. Then when I finally got to see the image, I loved the different colors, the reds and the blues and the yellows and the greens and the browns, how they all kind of rhyme with each other. And the general mussiness of the background, it's not a word, but that's okay, I think reminded me of the general problem in American history, which is slavery, which is the denigration of Black people yesterday, tomorrow, on Tuesday, at work, at home. So I think what's happening in that image really spoke to me in my personal project, and I was really happy to get the opportunity to be in conversation.
Kijo, maybe this is a good time to bring you in to give us some background and context around this piece. How did this end up in Stories from Storage, and maybe how it interacts with the exhibit?
Absolutely. Well, what I will say is that the work became part of the Stories from Storage exhibition because it was selected by the museum's director, Bill Griswold, as a way of really opening the entire exhibition with a kind of provocation, that this is inviting you to think differently about the museum and the stories that it tells. So there is such a thing as institutional voice, that an institution, a museum, is meant to speak with a singular voice, but Stories from Storage allows our audience to see that that institutional voice is in fact multivocal, that there are individual stakes, ethics, and interests always at play. And in this particular work, Kara Walker has been a controversial figure since she hit the art scene in 1995. After art school, 2 years later, she's the second youngest recipient of a MacArthur grant, and she began her career with these large-scale silhouettes depicting the various relational atrocities that occurred under the institution of slavery, using sort of mining archives for these tales that get elided or erased in traditional history books. And so then Bill Griswold then asked me to write a companion text to his to demonstrate that multivocality. And as a scholar and an educator, I am deeply invested in giving into elevating the gaps in history, and to allowing us to sit with the complicated relationships, not only racial, but economic, social, political complications that are what we would call the afterlives of slavery. So this work is something that really, I think, provokes thought immediately, as it is the first piece when you enter into the exhibition. And so, yeah, that is something that I was really happy and proud to be a part of, thinking about how we introduce histories and traumatic histories, because quietly as it's kept, the history of slavery isn't only traumatic for Black folks, it's equally traumatic for white folks and everyone who lives in this space, because the ways that it shifts the, for lack of a better term, efficacy of citizenship based upon certain characteristics doesn't only impact Black people. And as I said before, while the institution of slavery was shaping Black folks to feel inferior, to be structured as always less than, it was also shaping slaveholders to perform a certain kind of monstrosity under the cover, right, of gentility. And I think that works like this reveal that entering a genteel space was something this wild.
That is such an excellent orientation to this work in the exhibit, as well as sort of contextualizing the piece for our program today. Cam, I'm so excited to hear this piece. You created a poem in response to this piece of art, and it's a little bit different. So tell us a little bit about what you're going to share before you jump in.
Yeah, thank you. So if you haven't been to see this, sorry, you should go to see it. It's brilliant. It's huge. I'm 6'3", and I went to see it with another person who's just as big, and it dwarfed both of us. Like, we tried to, see if our wingspans could catch it. No, it was just so big. And when I thought about that sense of scale, I was like, well, I could make the font big. But instead I thought, well, let's try to drag the line out. Let's see how long this line can go. And then as I kept making them longer, I was realizing that I was trying to write into one line, or I guess write out of it, Kind of like what Kijo is saying, one of my problems with grammar and English language is its implicit relationship to whiteness. And I believe there's some forms of grammar that don't actually offer occasion for Black speech, like authentic Black speech or experience. So I thought if I wrote the poem on one line, I could begin to engage what that process feels like to escape grammar, perhaps. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading now. And I'm hoping that my time was accurate this morning. So the full title of this poem is Poem in One Line with Caesura. Okay? Go, go, greasy, inflamed indigestion of the soul, you say? So call I relief in the plant's matter of fact, that cool crunch from the front line's boiling salt and oil paint and materials through which to capture particular elixirs of Black pain, which subsume the subgenres of ontological banishment, fame, act. Why I ought to be wiped out of this moneyed rememory palace, this place always pre-made ruin, gun knock place, around how little locking words go shoring up white nationalist fantasies of public-private partners to literally ship Black people all around this blue shit. I am out of time here. I have been Black here, honest, queer here. And I don't know what wills folks not to think it's pretty fucking weird here. Oh, and this is how looking gets on down to Lear. Look, look, look. I'm a poet, so it's words I cook, kill, free or fine under the linguist's heavy sign. I'll go up against grammars of whiteness, which are what we might describe as punitive or securitizing grammars, or elevator music, that always already, particles gone saturat. So, S-O-S-O, so I am to say yay about anything in democracies today. Today's MLK Jr. Day. Today's PSYOP run Iowa Writers Workshop situation. Okay. Literally, what are you smiling about? Sorry, is there something worth smiling about? For? I'm just saying, we should not yet smile, for in reality, reality, retaility, we have travel yet, miles to go, though you cannot convince me. Self-annihilation has become unreasonable. As short as I've gone on these hard rocks, hard places, yikes. A carrot becomes a stick when you hit me with it. One more time. Imperative, pleasure, command. If you reality really heavy, porous memory, it is sinking. No one wants a phantom limbic system or to have the socio-legal and extra socio-legal architectures of a settler imperial nation state trained against them. Fucking Israel. Like, is there music in internment? No, there is no music in internment. Who would even ask that? What? I mean, look at it. Racist. She doesn't even like Black people. Don't she know we just want to see some positive images? Goddess, do I want some positive images? Do I want to achieve positive image to appear in the frame 1000% of my narrative life? I want, in this case, complete freedom from white history of the camera, the novel, the navel-glazed sense of mystery. So doctors hate this man, and click here to learn the secret of weight loss. You are congratulations, winner. Now take it. Break it. Everything ongoing, uneasy, tricked once into movement and now maintained in the dead gloss of money time. So yeah, all right, the experience is outsiding me, on standing out front of the frontispiece of its nowhere, that art's somewhere, that space which all spaces empty into. There, it's only history. Are you startled? Are you throwing a shoe about the ahistorical public-private conditions of Blackness? And about those public-private conditions of Blackness, I say, achoo! I say, out of what seeks my killing, I forgave you. I say, I love you, and am immediately complicated in my immediately complicated multivariant positionalities and identities and phenomenologies and archaeologies and ecologies and elbowful apologies. The paper takes land acknowledgedly. Say, sigh I oughta, about the lie I boughta. Alternatively, cry I oughta. We might imagine Walker's project as the necessary double big of American flesh industries. The panels are populated with bodily coalitions, 2 footless legs and a torso take below the waterline to produce the body line snapped in and out of time. See how the browns and yellows and reds all rhyme, like how if the subject is the coalition of history, the subject is also flagless piracy. Yes, see, the saying of such lies in proverbial right, wrong, in the casual taxonomies of common sense and decency and professionalism? And what hasn't a republic or any national formation done to a Black person anyway? And if the very moan barrow of America is slavery, and if the very clearly organized mesh of cultural, legal, and extra-legal codes which make Black life terribly, awfully, complicatedly difficult, there is that too, which we only need call the swirling. When Walker does it, it's graphite. When my Wi-Fi provider does it, it's nasal paper, dry English. When, say, my sky has tried its terror, literally any machine with its eye flies. And now say dull terror, say tremor of feeling, friendliness, followed up by semiotic, frowny faces. What are we to do with problems unpopulable, supernumerary, post-narrative? I trust the inevitability of contact erosion, be it by human hand or flame or that air, water, blameless cycle game. I hope that all these white nationalist institutions will burn. Listen, learn. People love Black people insofar that Blackness is a non-descriptive identifier and a system of non-descriptive identifiers. And you know what? I would like to know, am I dead yet? Because you people are not leaving me here to explain away all these beautiful parts of Black people. These nervous yawns.
Thank you. Thank you, Cam. Extraordinary. Wow.
Yeah.
Let's take a moment here. I want to sit sort of in the wake of the poem and the performance before we jump right into discussion. So please, if you're watching, take a moment and join in the chat. Any images, phrases, lines, ideas that are lingering with you, let us know. Put them out there. And any questions you have, we'll have time again at the end of the program for questions. Please let us know. But thank you again, Cam. That's extraordinary.
Thank you.
Well, Kijo, I'm excited to bring you back in because there's already so much to talk about with this piece and with Walker, and then to bring in this poem, it elicits sort of new things, I think, that we can sort of see and get revealed. And I know when we first talked about this, you in particular were excited about the form the poem is taking and how that resonates with the Republic of New Afrika at a Crossroads, but also Walker's work in general. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the form of the poem, I think both its formal properties in the way that it's written, the single line, but also its materiality, because it spoke to me so much of what I find in the Walker, this idea of continuousness, the unbroken line of verse, and then the scroll or spiral in the case of receipts, but also the double meaning of receipts, like you brought them. And we're requiring, right, more and more receipts to make the afterlives of slavery apparent, right? It's our word is not quite enough. And so what are those evidences? And then, so if we are close to the surface of the collage, and I find it fascinating, Cam, that you and I had a similar response to the work, because I wrote in the Members Magazine recently that upon my first viewing, a single word, current, captured my thinking because of that churning graphite and watercolor swirls that toss fragmented Black flesh hither and yon. But it also, because it appeals and applies to that which happened long ago and yet simultaneously belongs to the present. And so slavery's legacies of institutional violence exercised on culture, on American culture, full stop, because the stoppages of Black self-determination actually impact the entire ecosystem. It is actually a stopping of a potential for effervescence for everyone. And so I think of it as that it carries a legacy, right, of suppressing or erasing those narratives that might throw the perennial destructiveness of that potential into sharp relief. So your words, Pam, speak to me of the many afterlives of slavery, to its often strange continuities, its inescapability, as you were gesturing toward the kind of Afro-pessimist sentiment that there is no transcendence. But I also always remember that we too are continuous, right? We believe because in solidity, because it's what we need to hold ourselves together, but we are just a bunch of molecules attracting, spinning off, spinning in and among each other all the time. And so, and with Blackness, universally, it's often the catalyst for disruption. So I think about the ways that you were describing being subsumed by this work when you're in front of it, and being transformed in a way by that interaction, as in similar to the ways that Blackness works in the universe. I think specifically about black holes, which I've said to you just today. That's where physics goes to act up. It's unpredictable. It makes the even predictable utterly unpredictable. Or the ways knowing about one aspect of the universe can make another aspect less distinct. I think of Heisenberg's principle. The more you know about the velocity of a quanta, the less you'll know about its position. And the more you know about its position, the less you know about its speed. So the closer you get to one aspect, the more something else recedes. And that is the way I think these systems kind of work. The more, and so the cage that you built for your receipt to hold still that wildness just for a moment, but then it acted up, right, by nodding, is to me like the frames holding the diptych, holding for a moment, but still not really letting you go. So there's like a rest without a rest. So I really found that so compelling in your poem in one line with a caesura. So I want to thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate all of that. Thinking about the work and with the work. One of the things I'm thinking about, and we talked about this the other day, invisibility, hypervisibility. You know, having this in my office means that there's a scroll of paper on the ground, which is hyper visible, but I can't like look at it. Like there's other things I can glance at the side of my head and be like, that stance is still wrong. But this is, it's accessible and inaccessible in a way that I felt like Walker kind of is. Like, you know what she said, you heard her, those are Confederate flags, work it out. You know, and I think there's something very earnest and very engaging about that. I find it very stimulating. Like, yeah, this is not a place where you're going to find an answer. This is a place where your problem is going to develop new and more interesting features. So that's kind of how I've been thinking about it.
Fantastic. Yeah, her work is essentially about living in the gap, living in that space of the unimaginable. Right, but the actual, right? They are simultaneous. It makes me think of, and then we can move on, like Saidiya Hartman, in which in Scenes of Subjection, she talks about the potential danger of empathy. Because when abolitionists would appeal to folks by saying, imagine yourself under the lash, that was actually limiting slaves' experience to the limitations of that, to the limitations of folks who could not possibly imagine the depths of, right, the violences and the mundane violences that were occurring under this system. So yes. It's this kind of the everydayness of it is what I think it draws our attention to. Yeah, so I really appreciate this idea of visibility and invisibility, and also this idea, you brought in sound, but also this idea of when you do or don't allow a rest. And so I wondered if you might say a little bit about, to what end would you deny your listener kind of that rest, that pause, or that breath, except for the forced one by the knobs?
Yeah. So I think there's, well, the first one is the forced by the knots, because it's not something I can actually control. Like the cage started as like I have to read this in front of people who expect me to do it decently. So I think the different elements surrounding the poem began to shape how it was constructed and how it's even read, which I was finding really exciting. And then in terms of pause within the one line, I like to think a lot about variation or fracture or repetition, or kind of plasticity within one line. I've been reading a lot about Sergei Eisenstein and his thoughts on Walt Disney and how he feels about Disney's use of the corpus and the body and the line as an organizing principle. So in this poem, I guess I was wondering, how fast can I make this line run from the conditions of white supremacy and anti-Blackness? Like, what kinds of language would be required to escape? And where can you take breaths then? So I found that the rest places I was identifying were just within the poem, words like sigh and say that kept repeating, that I kept finding out about myself. Like, I'm really interested in public-private partnerships, and I can't wait to find out more. But yeah, I think that's the way I conceive of break or rupture or rest here.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah, rupture. And for me, rupture is like the cuts that Walker uses on the silhouettes. Actually reveal that this isn't a painting, but a collage when you get really close. They are similar. Yeah, I'm wondering, and I think that someone in the audience was also wondering, Cam, with whom or with anyone did you work through the presentation of that single line of poetry? And you know, how...
It takes a village to raise a child. It did. Oh, this started off pretty dumb. I had some pretty dumb iterations of this. I'm comfortable saying that because you have to take risks in art. There was going to be a banner at one point that I was going to try to put myself inside of. So actually, my fiance has been really helpful. He's good hands. So he kind of mocked up this little scroll thing that I could write on and pull out. So that was the first step. And then just yesterday, I went on Instagram Live, and I think Andrew was there with some friends. And I was just like, hey, guys, let's workshop this. So we did all kinds of stupid stuff. I did yoga poses and like threw it. And, you know, I did intentional tossings. I don't know. But we came up with some interesting stuff that I'm going to turn into another project building off of this poem. So.
That's super cool.
Just a reminder that you can add your questions in the chat. We want to hear from you. And actually now is a good time to start to move towards questions. So anyone feel free to jump in there. But this is what I love about this conversation, that bringing these two mediums in conversation with each other. Cam, your poem is pulling out so many more themes and ideas from this painting, from this work. And in return, I think we're understanding more about your poem through looking at Kara Walker's work too. So this has been really helpful.
Even what you were saying about, oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Matt.
Yeah.
Even what Cam was saying about the limitations of language, so that the title is scrolled at the bottom of the painting, but you don't get to witness that. It also emerges from the mire once you get really close in some ways, but there are a lot of, it both blends and pushes against, right, the composition.
When we were talking about, you know, crates and the frame and the diptych itself, a lot about caesura, because like as a poet, that's like, you know, a tab on a keyboard sometimes. But what if it was bigger? You know, I was just playing around with myself, and I was like, I wonder what happens if you just wait like 8 minutes before reading the second part. Like, what does it mean? I guess that's part of my question. Like, one of the reasons I resist rest in my own work is that I don't think there's an adequate form for it. It's so sad. There is no caring way to offer rest to a reader, to my little sister to anyone under capitalism and white supremacy. Like, all we have are facsimiles of care. We cannot represent care under such a violent and extractive system. So I think that's the other part of separation and splitting, I think, that I'm thinking about.
Thanks for that. Thank you.
Kijo, I see a question here that's about the painting itself, or I'm sorry, about the Kara Walker's work. I'm wondering if you could provide a little bit more detail or understanding of how you approach understanding the Republic of New Afrika.
Absolutely. So this work was created while Kara Walker was on residency at the American Academy in Rome. And she was using it to explore the history of civil rights movements in a very particular way, but and archivally. And I believe that this work is digging into ideas that were expressed by the Republic of New Afrika, which was both a group and a place to which that group aspired. They wanted to create a nation state for Black folks in the Southern United States that they saw in solidarity and reflecting that they would negotiate that land with all of the Native American folks whose treaties and whose lands had been removed. So they were hoping to create a space of Black self-determination, which was then foreclosed by the American system in various ways. But I think that what she is expressing is there is this constant sort of pursuit of the transformation of the ways that Black and brown people occupy American land, and always wants to point to that the ways that striving gets thwarted, not only by white supremacy as a concept, but by the ways we all either fit into it and fall into it over and over and over again, because it is so incredibly slippery. And chooses to withhold itself in these ways that allow you to, even in the pursuit of, I think about Walker's work in general, and those controversies of some of the essential controversy is whether she is actually transforming people's minds about the stakes and states of America, or offering yet again damaged Black flesh for consumption. So there are these ways in which, and so I think that the point of works like this is I then have to reckon with this as well. Every time there is the attempt or the desire to show a work like this, I have to reckon with my own ethics of what it means to place traumatic images in the public sphere, what it means to force a reckoning, and to have a kind of opening into these conversations that don't make any of us feel really great, but which are so liberating when we can move past the notion that the shame is the point. The shame is not the point. The shame, the transformation is the point. How do we adjust these relations such that we all can participate in the not to be overly hippie, my aunt loves to call me her flower child, but how can we cause a kind of, or make room for self-determination that is not it's not about it, that is truly about the self, that is truly about the expression, that is truly about the whole system rather than how we have to defeat it.
Thank you. So, Kijo, that was so helpful. And I think is a good lead into some of the questions we've been getting about Cam's poem and how it was created. And so maybe we could start with this question from Jennifer about the process that you went through, Cam, to make the poem. How long did you study the Kara Walker's work, this piece of art, before you started working on the poem? Did you have like a quick realization of what you wanted to do? Did it take longer to sort of think through? How did you sort of begin to approach the poem based on the work of art?
Yeah, so I'm just the big paper girl today, but this is the original draft. So a lot of it's just paper stuck together because I needed to get the line longer. So that was the way I started writing, and when I transcribe from place to place, that's when I edit. So I just like won't write that bad sentence again. I'll write something else instead. There's questions in the chat, and then Matt asked me questions. Sorry.
Yeah, you're answering for the two at the same time. How did you, after looking the work of art, how did that sort of inform the drafting of the poem? And then as well as how did the actual drafting go, which I think you already started to answer.
Okay, good. So I got the drafting part, right? So the drafting part was also me just writing it out physically. And I changed the way I was writing. I went left-handed sometimes, upside down other times, just to like force myself to slow down or to offer a new texture within the line. And then in terms of looking at the Kerouac, I bought a book, girl, because I saw some of those images and I was like, I'm very educated, but this is challenging. It's very challenging work. I encourage you. The book I read was called Speaking the Unspeakable. I don't have it with me right now, but it was wonderful and gave me a great entryway into her work. And I went to see it in person. I think that was an important experience. I think if I hadn't done that, this would have probably just been like a crown of sonnets or something. I just think that that obscene scale is what really got me going in terms of thinking about the Kerouac before I started writing here. Yeah.
Another connected question here that you sort of touched on is, would you read this poem differently if it was written in a more traditional form? Sort of lines, stanzas. How would this poem be different if it weren't the one extended line?
It's a great question. I think the poem in line breaks, well, you know, I have a version of it, that rough draft. And I can tell you what I found the failure within the object for me was that it didn't do a good enough job of maintaining tension. I think line breaks are great, but like they're also like line breaks, like break. And I think if you have a lot of them, you can end up producing a really gorgeous experience for a reader. But at the same time, kind of like Kijo was talking about, there's no gorgeousness in global anti-Blackness and white supremacy. So for me, I think line breaks felt like a tool that would make it a little too easy to talk about all of this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another question from Esther about influences and whether Walt Whitman or Allen Ginsberg sort of informed this longer line. I'm generally curious about outside sources besides the Kerouac piece that might have sort of brought to this work.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course, Whitman and Ginsberg are always in the back. They're in the back, you know, yelling stuff. But I was more interested in, there's a Lydia Clark work called Caminando, where she cuts a Mobius strip of paper as finely as she can, and it kind of undoes itself. And in an interview, she talks about how she wanted to walk to the end of the line or like see what that meant. And as a Black person, that seems like such an opportunity for freedom, like to walk to the end of this prescribed grammar, which has been built upon your degradation, you know? Like there's so many slurs for Black people. And like, I'll have a white friend that'll say something and I'll be like, do you know that's a slur? And I'll be like, no. And like, that's hilarious. So like, how do you actually develop agency in this kind of language? I think you do what Lydia Clark is suggesting. You extend the line, you keep walking it out until where you end up is somewhere less painful, maybe. Yeah. And then, yeah, that's all I have to say. Yeah.
We're going to wrap up just a minute here, but I want to bring Kijo back in because I think a lot of what Cam has been talking about with the poem might reflect on the work. Has anything Cam's been saying recently sort of drawn out more about the Republic of New Afrika, the Crossroads, for you?
I think so. And I mean, if we can draw back to the whole composition again, I just want to say, you know, that those symbols, how do you upset the symbols? It's funny because this was made in 2016, but you know, the Confederate flag and the Confederacy now loom so large in our present as we're having these debates around Confederate monuments and what does it mean and what is the role of museums in that space. And for me, this work in particular, so when I've heard Kara Walker speak about her work before, it's not about her personal, it's about exploding this whole, or making visible the system and the feelings, the emotions that get dredged up in that system. So how do we escape it? And so I think of it as a kind of catharsis, but a catharsis that ensnares the rest of us. So this way in which the Cam's poem is walking away or out of the pain, but it ensnares the rest of us into contemplating that process that it even exists. That you have to think of a way to escape the grammar of degradation and compose a liberatory grammar. And in my thinking, this reuse of American symbology, the tignon, those head wraps, which were used in New Orleans and southern states to actually make a distinction between enslaved women and not enslaved women, because you couldn't do it epidermally because there was so much mixing. Right? So the ways that they could keep, as you were saying before, keep the shape that they wanted was to instantiate these new things. So she takes those symbols and jumbles them up, and all of our expectations get undermined. Silhouettes were these beautiful, soft ways of genteel, showing one's gentility, and a democratic form because it was cheaper than having your portrait painted. And she takes that and lures you into this space in which you think you're going to witness one thing, and instead you get something else. So it's that ability to be both catharsis and to ensnare others into a thoughtful process that I think these two artworks have deeply in common.
Well, this has been so inspiring and challenging and enlightening. So please, everyone, join me in thanking Cam and Kijo for this wonderful discussion. Thank you to Andrew, Daniel, everyone behind the scenes at CMA for making this event possible. And thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon. We apologize again about the sound issues at the beginning, and encourage you to go see this Kara Walker work in person at the museum if you can. As you said, there's sort of, you can't compare the digital version to actually being in front of it. So I hope you go. And please join us for the next Desktop Dialogue program on Wednesday, May 19th at noon for Rethinking Artistic Traditions, discussing the works of Mario Moore and what relevance historical paintings have to us today. Find out more about this and other upcoming programs at cma.org. If you'd like to explore more of the work in our collection, visit CMA Collection online. And if we didn't get to your question during the program, if you have more, you can always go to ArtLens Ask at the CMA website, and someone will get back to you with an answer. The links to both are below. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Thanks again, Cam and Kijo, and see you all again soon.